welcome. I'm Jeremy Olivier, and here's what happened this week. A teacher has lost his Taiwanese status for obtaining a household registration document in China. It's the first such case since the government issued a new interpretation order in April. The Mainland Affairs Council, which governs relations with China, recently revoked the legal status of the teacher, surnamed Zhang, after he was found to have obtained a document for household registration in China in 2024. Under cross-strait regulations, Taiwanese people are barred from having household registration in China or risk losing their legal status in Taiwan. The Council issued its interpretation in April, detailing the Chinese documents that Taiwanese people are not allowed to hold.
那已经废止张立奇的台湾身份哈，那未来他如果要来台湾，必须要依照两岸条例相关规定申请入境许可，并经过同意以后才能够入境。
The Council clarified that Taiwanese are allowed to hold Chinese documents that don't require household registration. Thousands of people gathered in Taipei on Wednesday to commemorate the 36th anniversary of the crackdown at Tiananmen Square in Beijing. The vigil brought together survivors as well as Uyghur, Tibetan, and Hong Kong activists in exile. As Rick Glauert reports, remembering June 4th is becoming more and more important in Taiwan.
Remembering those who died in pursuit of democracy. In the centre of Taipei, hundreds gather to commemorate the 36th anniversary of Tiananmen Square. Also known by its date, June 4th, that day, a democracy movement in China was brutally oppressed by Chinese soldiers opening fire on crowds.
我们知道，就是之前这个6·4天安门事件这个事情，其实对整个台湾来说，应该是说对整个中国大陆来说，是一个记忆。那可是经过了这么多年，就是中国共产党这边，他们把这个记忆给抹杀掉了。
就是纪念6·4，然后希望中国有一天可以民主化，因为我认为说民主自由是一个普世价值。那我们应该要去纪念在世界各地为了争取 这个价值而牺牲的人们，
我会觉得说6·4算是一个很重要的民主历程，在对于我香港还是中国来讲的话，甚至我觉得应该说全世界也应该都是同样的，因为民主自由，然后人权的话，应该都是无分国籍的。
Taiwan is now the only place in the Chinese-speaking world with large public vigils commemorating Tiananmen Square. Every year, hundreds of people gather here in the heart of the capital, Taipei, to mark the anniversary of Beijing's brutal crackdown at Tiananmen Square. It's an event that's taking on added resonance in recent years, as commemorations like this are still taboo in mainland China and now impossible in Hong Kong. For decades, Hong Kong's Victoria Park looked like this on June 4th, with as many as hundreds of thousands of people gathering to mark a date scratched from history just across the border in mainland China. But this year, even holding a white flower meant being taken away by national security police. A new normal here after Beijing cracked down on the once semi-autonomous territory after mass pro-democracy protests. And for the first time in Taiwan, Hong Kongers in exile held their own vigil here.
從香港維多利亞公園走到台北228和平公園，係咪？代表香港人呢，無論佢身處喺邊一個地方，佢都唔會忘記1989年嘅時候共產黨屠殺人民。
Memorials here in Taiwan take place as China ups its pressure over the island nation to accept its claims of sovereignty, sending military boats and planes around the island, but also using so-called grey zone warfare tactics like cyber attacks and disinformation. Organisers and government officials pushing ahead with memorials despite bomb threats for commemorating one of the darkest chapters in modern Chinese history.
It shows Taiwan's value. It shows the difference between Taiwan and China. When people use this kind of a ceremony to memorize the Tiananmen incident, when the international society show this message, it means Chinese government, they also need to know the world is watching them.
For many people here in Taiwan, remembering Tiananmen is not just about the past. It's about the present and future threats to this democracy by China. In a world where authoritarianism is expanding, this island democracy wants to carry the torch, not only for those who died in Beijing nearly 4 decades ago, but for those whose freedom is under threat today. Scott Huang, Hank Xu, Andy Shuer and Rick Lowett in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
The clock is ticking for a mass recall campaign that aims to shake up Taiwan's legislature. Campaigners looking to unseat politicians from the opposition Kuomintang and Taiwan People's Party say they're ready for a final push, but the opposition has plans of its own. Leslie Liao has this report.
The political showdown of the year is approaching, and while the dates are not set, the battle lines are drawn up. In a perfect storm scenario, nearly a third of lawmakers could face losing their seats in a mass recall campaign that has been going on for months. And while lawmakers from both ruling and opposition blocs are at risk, these campaigners looking to unseat opposition lawmakers say momentum is on their side. They believe they have the petition numbers to trigger recall votes on 31 Kuomintang lawmakers. Meanwhile, they don't believe petitions to put ruling DPP politicians on the recall ballot will pass the threshold. The campaigners at this press conference say that despite what it might look like, they are not partisans or even necessarily fans of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. They say theirs is a grassroots movement motivated by something other than party labels. A big name here today, China-sanctioned semiconductor tycoon Robert Cao explains.
我们这次罢免是公民团体看到国家陷入一个大的危机，这个危机就是国民党的党工跟他的立委结合了共产党，正在想消灭我们主权。
Campaigners on the ground say even disillusioned Kuomintang supporters are signing to recall their own party's lawmakers.
是因为他们发现这个国民党跟他们以前认识的已经不一样了。以前的国民党犯错了，至少还会刁刁，现在不是硬凹，怎么样凹就是不会认错。
However, the clean sweep these organizers hope for is far from guaranteed. There's still time for the KMT to get its own recall campaigns rolling past the threshold, setting the stage for a fierce contest on both sides. In another part of Taipei City, a recall campaign against ruling DPP legislator Wu Peiyi is digging its heels in.
我们目前还有一个比较长的阶段需要努力啦，然后我们也是因为也剩最后一天了，那我们就尽量做，然后我们战斗到最后一刻。
On the eve of a crucial petition deadline, organizers here say they're going to keep their headquarters open all night to collect signatures.
我们要想说，就是希望大家，我们不管是支持者、中正万华的好朋友，还是任何人，想来这边跟我们聊聊天，然后坐在这边吃东西、喝东西，然后我们共同度过，用愉快心情共同度过这个罢免的最后一个晚上。
The unfolding contest is going to pit Taiwan's two political blocs head to head. And if these campaigners get their wish, a political earthquake is set to rock Taiwan's legislature. Alex Chen, Justin Wu, John Van Trieste, and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
TSMC is reporting record profits and booming demand for its AI chips. But at its annual shareholders meeting in Hsinchu, the spotlight turned for a moment to worker safety after a deadly accident at one of its construction sites just days earlier. Chris Gordon has the story.
C.C. Wei, chair and CEO of Taiwan chip giant TSMC, showing a bit of humanity as he apologizes to the family of a construction worker who died last week while building one of their new facilities in Jiayi County.
这个生命是无价的，而且我们也很注重公安。我们有所不足的地方，我必须代表公司致歉。 我们实质是很努力的，我们不只是会赚钱，我们还有社会的责任。
The apology punctuated the company's annual shareholder meeting that was otherwise awash in record numbers. TSMC reported more than $25 billion in revenue last quarter, a year-on-year increase of more than 40%. Taking questions from investors, CC Wei said that while U.S. tariffs and fluctuations in the exchange rate of the Taiwan dollar had hurt company profit margins, demand for TSMC chips is outpacing supply.
全世界的经济稍微往下调，但是 AI 还是非常的强劲，所以台积电还是会非常的成长，还是在20几%中位数，然后我们的今年的营业额和今年的盈余都会再创历史新高。
In the years since Wei became the first person to serve as both TSMC chair and CEO, the company has continued to expand abroad, in Japan, Germany, and the US. However, Wei denied reports that TSMC is planning to build facilities in the Middle East. That's as one of the company's main customers, NVIDIA, is making deals to build some of the world's largest data centers in that region. But Taiwan's largest company is not without controversy. Prior to Wei's apology, labor groups and victims' families protested outside the meeting, calling for more safety on the company's construction sites. The company has also been criticized for its power and water usage. But many investors still seem satisfied with the bottom line. With rising global demand, record profits, and an expanding international footprint, executives here are hoping that's enough to keep shareholders on their side. Alex Chun and Chris Gorin in Hsinchu for TaiwanPlus.
The U.S. Trump administration's policies are biting in Taiwan, despite a temporary pause on higher U.S. import tariffs. Companies worried about tariffs have put hundreds of workers on unpaid leave, while the funds for labor insurance and pensions are hemorrhaging money. John Van Trieste reports.
Factories like this still have one more month to go before the Trump administration is scheduled to reimpose sweeping import tariffs, including on Taiwanese goods. But for many, this reprieve is hardly reassuring. The Labor Ministry says companies bracing for impact have put over 800 workers on unpaid leave, most of them in the manufacturing sector. That's around 30% of the workers on unpaid leave nationwide.
有一家是机械设备制造业，他通报了140人。那这家公司主要做的是减速机轮的齿轮首次通报要实施减班休息。
Business leaders are hoping the government will lend a hand.
希望政府能够协助企业做税务的减免，比如说所得税或者是货物税的印花税的减免。
But this call for help comes at a financially awkward time for the government. Its funds for pensions, unemployment, overdue wages, and more depend on investments, and market volatility and exchange rate movements, driven in part by Trump administration policies, have bit hard. By the end of April, losses for the year had reached $6.6 billion US dollars.
金融市场都受到了这个地缘政治跟美国关税贸易政策的影响，应该是说不是只有台股啦，科技类的包括台股或者是像费城半导体这指数，它的跌幅都比较大，都有超过双位数哈。
All of which leaves Taiwan facing more uncertainty. The Labor Ministry believes that in the long run, currency markets will settle down, and already May has seen something of an uptick. But jitters about what Trump will or won't do mean there may be more jolts on the way. Luffy Li and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
COVID-19 cases are surging around Taiwan, and last week saw the highest number of severe cases reported so far this year. The Centers for Disease Control say nearly 63,000 people visited a hospital last week for the disease, and infections are expected to keep rising in June. This latest surge follows last weekend's Dragon Boat Festival, when many Taiwanese were out celebrating with family and friends. The CDC is reminding people to mask up and rest at home if they have mild symptoms, and to seek medical help if needed. Thank you for watching Here's What Happened. Before we go, let's check out this small village in Colombia where they've turned the main street into a giant slide. I'm Jeremy Olivier. Take care and see you next time.